Milan had always dreamed of finding something no one else had ever seen. Since childhood, he spent hours reading about lost planets, forgotten ruins, and civilizations that had vanished without leaving answers behind. When he grew older, he joined a small research crew that traveled the galaxy looking for uncharted worlds. For years they found nothing more than empty rocks and frozen moons, until one day their scanners detected something unusual. It was a planet hidden inside a belt of storms, so thick that no ship had ever mapped the region properly. From orbit, the crew could see dark clouds twisting around the world like chains. Bolts of lightning flashed across its surface. Yet through the clouds, tall shapes appeared, shapes that looked too perfect to be natural. The outlines of towers and broken walls reached high, even though they had been worn down by ages of storms. The captain of the crew was cautious. He said the planet was dangerous and landing would be unwise. But Milan could not turn away. His heart beat faster as he stared at the ruins on the screen. He felt as if something was calling him. After long hours of debate, Milan convinced the crew to land on the surface. They set their ship down near a cracked plain of stone, where the ruins rose like black teeth from the ground. As the group stepped outside, the air felt heavy and dry. The ruins were enormous, built from a material that was not stone but not metal either. Strange markings covered every wall and pillar, symbols that none of them could read. They looked like language but carried the weight of warnings. The structures were broken, yet their design showed intelligence and purpose. Milan walked slowly through the ruins, his hand brushing the ancient walls. "This place is older than anything I've ever seen," whispered one of the crew members. Milan nodded. "Older, and still standing. Whoever built this wanted it to last forever." The deeper they went, the stranger the ruins became. They found long corridors with ceilings so high the light from their lamps barely reached the top. They saw broken statues, their faces worn away, their hands pointing toward the ground as if guarding something below. In one chamber, the floor was carved with a giant circle filled with patterns that looked like stars. Milan bent down to study it. "It looks like a map," he said. "But the stars don't match any system we know." The crew grew uneasy. The silence inside the ruins was too complete, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Every step echoed through the halls, and each shadow looked like it could move when no one was watching. One crew member suggested they return to the ship before the storm grew worse, but Milan insisted on pressing forward. He felt sure the ruins were hiding something greater. As they entered a narrow passage, the ground suddenly shook beneath their feet. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the walls seemed to hum with energy. A sound like grinding stone filled the air. The crew froze, looking around with wide eyes. From the darkness ahead, figures began to appear. At first, they thought they were statues moving because of the shaking ground. But as the shapes stepped into the light, their horror grew. They were skeletons, but not ordinary ones. Their frames were made of strange metal fused with fragments of alien bone. Their skulls glowed faintly with blue light. Each carried a weapon that looked forged from the same unearthly material as the ruins themselves. The skeletons moved in silence, their steps heavy and exact. They formed a line across the passage, blocking the way forward. The crew instinctively raised their tools as if they could defend themselves, but the skeletons did not attack. They simply stood, weapons held firm, staring with empty eyes that still seemed alive with purpose. One crew member whispered in fear, "What are they?" Milan's voice was calm, though his heart raced. "They are guardians. This whole place is not just ruins. It's a fortress. And these are the ones still standing watch." The others wanted to turn back, but Milan could not. He felt the truth in his words. These guardians were not random monsters. They were placed here to protect something, something that lay deeper inside the ruins. The skeleton army had been waiting for countless years, bound to their duty long after the civilization that made them was gone. As the wind howled outside the ruins, Milan stared at the silent figures. He realized the treasure he had been searching for all his life might be hidden here, beyond the wall of skeleton guards. The real question was whether he and his crew had the courage to face what was waiting beyond. The skeleton army did not move, but their presence filled the chamber with weight. The air felt colder, and the ground seemed to pulse with a rhythm like a heartbeat. Milan tightened his grip on his pack and stepped forward, determined to uncover the secret of this forgotten world. The others hesitated, torn between fear and curiosity. But Milan's voice broke through their doubt. If we turn back now, we will never know the truth. These ruins are calling to us, and I intend to answer. The skeletons stood like a wall of deathless soldiers, watching as Milan took his first step toward them. The skeleton guards stood in silence, their bodies unmoving, their glowing skulls locked on Milan and his crew. For a long moment, no one dared to breathe. The sound of the storm outside could be heard faintly through the cracks in the ruined walls, but inside the chamber there was only the heavy stillness of watchful eyes. One of the crew, a nervous man named Ryan, whispered, "They are not alive. They cannot be alive." His voice shook as he stared at the metal bones gleaming under the dim lights. "They move," Milan replied softly, never taking his eyes off the guardians. "That is enough to call them alive." Another crew member, a woman named Nira, tightened her grip on her scanner. "Maybe they are machines. Maybe this is all some old defense system still working after thousands of years." Milan slowly stepped closer. The skeletons did not raise their weapons, but they shifted slightly, the sound of grinding metal echoing through the chamber. The movement was enough to make the rest of the crew step back in fear. "They are not attacking," Milan said firmly. "They only block our way." The crew exchanged uneasy looks. It was true. The skeleton army had not struck them down, though it easily could have. The line of guardians seemed to form a barrier, as if warning them that the path beyond was forbidden. Milan crouched and examined the floor. The stones here were smoother, polished compared to the cracked ground behind them. Strange markings were etched into the surface, glowing faintly when his light touched them. They were symbols similar to the ones on the walls, but arranged in neat circles. "It is a boundary," Milan muttered. "They guard what lies beyond this point." Ryan's voice grew sharp. "Then we should turn back. This is not meant for us." But Milan shook his head. "If they wanted us gone, we would not still be standing. They are waiting for something." Nira raised her scanner and studied the guardians. The readings made little sense. Their structure was a blend of bone and metal, fused in ways that defied ordinary science. Their skulls pulsed with a dim energy, almost like a heartbeat. "They are not just machines," she whispered. "Something more is keeping them alive. Something ancient." The skeletons remained still, their glowing eyes following every movement. Finally, Milan decided to test them. He pulled a small stone fragment from the ground, carved with one of the symbols. He held it up high and stepped toward the line of guards. The moment his foot crossed the circle on the floor, the skeletons moved as one. Their weapons rose with perfect precision, pointed directly at him. The sound of grinding filled the chamber again. The crew gasped in fear, and Ryan shouted for Milan to stop. But Milan stood firm, holding the carved stone in front of him. "We are not here to steal," he said aloud, though he knew they might not understand his words. "We only seek to know." For a breathless moment, nothing happened. Then the skeletons froze again. Their weapons remained raised, but they did not strike. Milan slowly lowered the stone and stepped back. Instantly, the weapons dropped into silence once more. "They understand," Milan said, his voice filled with wonder. "They know why we are here." The crew was speechless. None of them had ever seen anything like this before. These guardians were not simple traps or old machines left to rust. They carried purpose. They carried judgment. Nira's eyes shone with curiosity. "If they can judge us, then maybe there is a way to pass." A way to show we are worthy. Milan nodded slowly. Yes. The question is how. The chamber grew colder as the group stood in thought. The storm outside rumbled louder, shaking the ruined walls. Dust fell from the ceiling. The skeleton army never blinked, never swayed, only watched. Ryan could not bear the silence any longer. We should leave now, he hissed. This is too dangerous. Whatever they are guarding, it is not for humans. We are trespassing. But Milan's eyes remained on the glowing skulls. If they wanted us dead, we would not still be here. They are testing us. He pointed toward the sealed passage behind the guardians. Beyond them lies the treasure or the truth of this place. And I believe they will let us through, if we can prove ourselves. The crew argued in whispers, fear battling against curiosity. Milan did not wait for their decision. He stepped forward again, this time without the stone, his hands open and empty. The skeletons moved at once, weapons rising, but again they did not strike. Instead, a faint hum filled the air, coming from the walls and floor. The glowing eyes of the guardians brightened. Milan stopped just short of their weapons, his heart pounding. He felt a strange pressure in his chest, as if the ruins themselves were watching him. For a moment, he thought he heard voices, whispers in a language he could not understand. Then, one of the skeletons lowered its weapon. The others followed a moment later, their arms folding against their sides. Slowly, the line of guardians stepped aside, creating a narrow path that led deeper into the ruins. The crew gasped in disbelief. Ryan stumbled backward, shaking his head, while Nira's face filled with awe. They let us pass, she whispered. Milan nodded, though his voice was low. Not all of us. Only those who choose to walk forward. They are watching, weighing every step. The path was open, but the air was heavier than ever. Beyond the line of skeletons, the ruins stretched into deeper shadows, where secrets long buried were waiting. Milan took a deep breath and stepped into the passage. Behind him, the skeleton army closed ranks again, sealing the way for anyone who might hesitate. Milan's footsteps echoed softly as he walked into the dark passage beyond the skeleton guards. The air grew colder, carrying a strange metallic taste, as if the ruins themselves were alive. Behind him, Nira followed closely, her scanner still in hand. Ryan hesitated, but the thought of being left alone with the skeleton army pushed him forward too. The rest of the crew stayed behind, unwilling to risk more. The passage stretched downward like a tunnel carved into the bones of the planet. Symbols glowed faintly along the walls, lighting their way with a pale blue shimmer. The designs were strange but orderly, as if guiding them deeper. Milan traced one of the markings with his hand. It pulsed faintly at his touch, sending a ripple of light along the wall. These symbols, Milan whispered, they are not just decoration. They are instructions. Nira tilted her scanner, reading the energy signals. It feels like a language mixed with a machine code. Whatever built this place designed it to respond to touch. The further they went, the louder the hum in the air became. It was a steady sound, like the beating of a heart. Milan felt it in his chest, each thrum pulling him forward. After what felt like hours, they reached a large chamber. The room was circular, with high walls covered in glowing carvings. In the center stood a tall stone pillar surrounded by more of the skeletal guardians. These ones were not standing in a line but arranged in a circle around the pillar. They did not move, but their glowing skulls turned slowly as Milan and the others entered, watching them with silent judgment. The pillar itself was covered in hundreds of symbols arranged in spirals. At its base was a small platform, smooth and inviting, as if someone was meant to stand there. Milan stepped closer, ignoring Ryan's warning calls. As soon as his boot touched the platform, the chamber came alive. The carvings on the walls brightened, filling the room with pale blue light. The skeleton's eyes glowed brighter too, their heads tilting slightly. The pillar began to rotate slowly, its spiral markings shifting into new patterns. A deep voice echoed through the chamber, not from a mouth but from the walls themselves. The words were alien, impossible to understand, yet they carried weight and rhythm. Milan closed his eyes and listened, and somehow the meaning formed in his mind. "Speak the phrase," the voice demanded. Milan's heart raced. He looked at the glowing symbols, then back at the skeletons. They were waiting. He did not know the language, yet he felt as if he could understand pieces of it. He touched the pillar, and one set of symbols lit up brighter than the rest. His lips moved before he could think. He spoke the phrase. The chamber fell silent. The pillar stopped moving, and the glow of the walls dimmed to a steady light. The skeletons lowered their weapons at once, their heads bowing slightly as if in respect. A section of the wall across the chamber rumbled and slid open, revealing a new passage deeper underground. They listened. Nero whispered in awe. "You spoke their command." Milan stepped off the platform, his face pale but his eyes shining with determination. "It was not me. It was this place guiding me. The ruins want us to move forward." Ryan shook his head in disbelief. "This is madness. You are speaking words you do not even know. These guardians bow to you as if you belong here." His voice grew sharp. "This is not human. You should not be leading us." But Milan ignored his protest. The open passage was waiting, and the call in his chest was stronger than ever. He felt as if the ruins had chosen him. The group moved through the new corridor, the skeletons watching silently as they passed. This tunnel was narrower and filled with strange mechanisms carved into the walls. Gears of metal and crystal turned slowly, powered by some energy that had lasted for centuries. Streams of light flowed like rivers inside the walls, carrying symbols that shifted and changed as they passed. "This is not just a tomb," Nero whispered. "It is a machine. The entire ruin is alive." Milan nodded. "The Guardians are part of it. The skeleton army is not here by chance. They are tied to the heart of this place." The passage ended in another door, but this one was sealed by a glowing field of light. Beyond the barrier, they could see glimpses of another chamber filled with tall structures like towers and what looked like a throne carved from crystal. At its center was a massive stone chest, pulsing faintly as though it had a heartbeat. "That must be the treasure," Ryan breathed. Milan stepped closer to the barrier. The energy rippled like water when he reached out. His hand stopped short, unable to pass through. Symbols lit up above the barrier, shifting into a new pattern. Nero scanned them and frowned. "It is another command. Another phrase must be spoken. But this one is more complex." Milan studied the symbols, his mind turning with thoughts he could not fully explain. The patterns moved like stars in a sky, forming constellations. He realized each marking was not just a word but also a sound, a note in a song. "This is not just language," Milan said softly. "It is music. A key." The skeletons behind them stirred, their weapons scraping lightly against the floor. The crew froze, fear rushing back into their hearts. The guardians were waiting, their glowing eyes fixed on Milan. He felt the weight of their gaze, the pressure of the barrier, and the hum of the ruins all pressing into his chest. The answer was here, and it was his task to unlock it. Milan took a deep breath and prepared to speak again. The glowing barrier pulsed like a living wall, its ripples moving in rhythm with the steady hum of the ruins. Milan stood before it, staring at the strange symbols floating in the air. They shifted slowly, forming new patterns like stars rearranging in the night sky. He felt they were waiting for him to answer, just as the guardians were. Behind him, Nero whispered, "It is a test. The whole ruin is testing us." Ryan shook his head nervously. "This is not for us. These trials are meant for whoever built this place. We should not be here." But Milan ignored his fear. He looked at the symbols again. They pulsed in a steady rhythm, and in his mind he could almost hear a faint melody, as if the chamber itself was singing. He remembered the voice from before, deep and commanding, asking him to speak the phrase. Now he felt another command, but this one asked not just for words. It asked for courage. He closed his eyes, let the hum fill his chest, and began to speak. His voice trembled at first, but as he continued, the strange sounds flowed smoother, carried by something greater than memory. Each word was strange yet familiar, like a forgotten language rising from deep within him. The barrier shivered, then split into streams of light that faded into the walls. The way was open. The crew stared in awe. Nira smiled faintly. You did it again. The ruins accept you. But Ryan's face was pale. No. They are pulling you deeper and deeper. This is not a gift. It is a trap. Milan did not argue. He stepped into the chamber beyond, and the others followed. Inside, the air was colder. The chamber was massive, its walls lined with tall pillars carved with more glowing symbols. At the center stood 3 stone platforms, each one surrounded by skeleton guardians. Unlike the others, these skeletons were armed with shields as well as weapons, their bodies taller and heavier. They seemed like commanders of the army, their empty eyes burning brighter than before. The ground trembled as the chamber came alive. The symbols on the walls began to shift, and a deep voice filled the space once again. Milan could not understand the exact words, but the meaning pressed into his thoughts. 3 trials. Strength. Knowledge. Courage. Only the worthy may pass. The first platform lit up with a red glow. One of the skeleton commanders raised its weapon and stepped forward, pointing directly at Milan. Nira gasped. It wants you to fight. Ryan grabbed Milan's arm. This is insane. You cannot fight that thing. But Milan shook him off. He knew he had no choice. The trial had chosen him. He stepped onto the platform, and the skeleton raised its blade. The moment Milan's boots touched the stone, the floor beneath him hardened with a ring of light, sealing him into the trial. The skeleton attacked with speed that shocked him. Its weapon came down with crushing force, and Milan barely rolled aside in time. The strike cracked the stone, sending sparks into the air. Milan grabbed a fallen staff from the floor, its surface made of the same strange material as the ruins. He raised it just in time to block another blow, the clash ringing through the chamber like thunder. The skeleton's strength was overwhelming. Milan stumbled back, his arms shaking under the weight of each strike. But he refused to give in. Each time he fell, he forced himself back to his feet. Sweat dripped from his forehead, his breaths came in gasps, yet his eyes never lost their fire. Finally, he noticed something. Each time the skeleton raised its weapon, there was a faint delay, a flicker of blue light running through its bones. It was a pattern. Milan timed his movements carefully, and when the flicker appeared again, he struck. His staff crashed against the skeleton's chest, shattering its glowing core. The guardian froze, then lowered its weapon. It bowed once before stepping back into place, silent once more. The red glow faded. The voice echoed again. Strength proven. The second platform lit with a green glow. This time, glowing symbols appeared in the air, forming a puzzle of shifting shapes and patterns. The skeleton commander nearest to it stepped aside, waiting. Milan approached cautiously. It is a test of knowledge, Nero whispered. Milan studied the symbols. They twisted like pieces of a star map. He touched one of them, and it spun into place. Slowly, he realized they formed a picture of the sky, constellations of long-lost stars. Piece by piece, he arranged them, guided not by knowledge of the stars themselves but by the rhythm of the patterns. At last, the puzzle clicked into place. The chamber trembled with approval, and the green glow faded. The voice spoke again. Knowledge proven. Then came the third platform, glowing with a golden light. Unlike the others, no skeleton stepped forward, no puzzle appeared. The platform remained empty, waiting. "What is it asking?" Nero whispered. Milan stepped onto the stone. The chamber grew darker, the hum of the ruins falling silent. Suddenly, the floor vanished beneath him. He fell into a void of endless darkness, weightless and alone. Whispers filled his ears, voices calling his name in doubt and fear. Images flickered before him, his crew leaving him behind, the skeleton army tearing him apart, the treasure turning to dust in his hands. It was a test of courage. Milan clenched his fists. "I will not run," he said aloud, his voice steady. "Whatever waits in the shadows, I will face it." The darkness trembled. The voices grew louder, pressing against his mind, but Milan stood tall. He placed one hand on his chest and took a deep breath. His fear was real, but it would not control him. "I came here for the truth," he said. "And I will see it, no matter the cost." The void shattered like glass. Light rushed back, and Milan found himself standing on the platform again. The golden glow faded. The voice filled the chamber one last time. "Courage proven. The path opens." The far wall rumbled, and a hidden door slid aside, revealing a grand staircase leading even deeper. The skeleton commanders lowered their weapons and stepped aside, bowing their heads. Milan turned to his crew, his chest still rising with heavy breaths. "The trials are over. Now we will see what they were guarding." The staircase stretched downward, each step glowing faintly as Milan and his companions descended. The air grew cooler, and the hum of the ruins deepened into a steady rhythm like a slow heartbeat. Every wall was lined with carvings of battles long past. Warriors with strange armor faced shadowy enemies, their weapons raised high. At the end of each carving, the same army of skeletons stood guard, watching in silence, protecting something unseen. Nira ran her fingers across one of the carvings. "They built all of this to keep something safe. But what was so important that they turned their own dead into guardians?" Ryan muttered, "Whatever it is, it should stay buried." His face was pale, and his hands trembled, but still he followed. The stairs ended at a vast chamber, larger than any they had seen before. It was shaped like a cathedral, with towering pillars reaching into the shadows above. At the center stood a great stone chest, its surface covered in glowing veins of blue light. The chest pulsed softly, almost as if it were breathing. Surrounding it was a ring of skeleton guardians, taller and stronger than any they had faced before. Their weapons glimmered in the light of the chest, and their glowing skulls turned as one to watch the intruders. Milan felt the weight of their gaze pressing on him, but he stepped forward boldly. "This is it," he said softly. "The treasure." Nira's eyes were wide with awe. "It looks alive. Whatever is inside, it is not just a simple object." The hum of the chamber grew louder, and a deep voice filled the air once again. This time, the words carried clear meaning in Milan's mind. "Guardian of the treasure, chosen by the trials, speak your intent. Do you come to claim, or to protect?" The question froze him. The skeleton army waited, their weapons ready, their eyes burning brighter. Milan's crew turned to him in silence, their faces filled with tension. Ryan broke the silence. "Say you claim it? Think of what knowledge is inside that chest. We could bring it back to the human worlds. We could be rich, powerful. Entire empires would pay for what lies here." Nira shook her head quickly. "If they built all of this to guard it, then it is not meant to be taken. It is meant to be preserved. If we claim it, the guardians will destroy us." Milan's chest tightened. He stepped closer to the chest, staring at the glowing veins of light across its surface. He placed a hand on the stone. The moment his skin touched it, a flood of images rushed into his mind. He saw the ancient civilization that had built the ruins, their towers rising into skies filled with light. He saw their enemies, dark shapes spreading like a plague across worlds, destroying everything in their path. Desperate to protect their knowledge, the civilization bound their strongest warriors into skeleton guardians, fusing bone with metal so they could defend the treasure for eternity. The chest was not filled with gold or jewels. It contained their history, their science, and their wisdom, all stored within crystalline structures inside. The images faded, leaving Milan breathless. He understood now. This treasure was not meant to make someone powerful. It was a message, a gift for the future, but only for those who would protect it rather than abuse it. He turned back to his crew, his voice steady. This is not ours to take. It is a library, a legacy of their people. They gave their lives to guard it. If we try to claim it, we dishonor them. Ryan's eyes blazed with frustration. You are letting fear control you. Think of what this could mean for humanity. We could rebuild entire worlds with that knowledge. Why should we leave it here to rot? The Guardians do not protect treasure for greed, Milan answered firmly. They protect it for those who will guard it as they did. That is the choice before us. The deep voice filled the chamber again. Chosen one, speak your decision. Milan took a deep breath. His heart was heavy, but his choice was clear. I choose to protect it. The skeleton guardians lowered their weapons as one. Their glowing eyes dimmed slightly, no longer filled with threat but with recognition. The chest pulsed brighter, its light spreading across the chamber like dawn breaking after a long night. Nira sighed with relief, but Ryan stepped back in anger. You fool! You would waste this gift. If you will not claim it, then I will. Before Milan could stop him, Ryan rushed toward the chest. The moment his hand touched its surface, the skeleton army roared to life. Their weapons rose, and the chamber shook with thunder. The air filled with energy, and the guardians moved to strike. Milan shouted, Stop! He does not speak for me. The skeletons froze, their weapons inches from Ryan. Their glowing skulls turned back to Milan. The voice echoed once more. You are the chosen. Only your will binds the guardians. Ryan fell back, trembling in terror. The skeletons returned to their circle around the chest, silent once again. Milan understood now more than ever. He had been chosen not to take the treasure, but to guard it, to carry the same responsibility as the ancient civilization before him. He turned back to his companions, his voice low but certain. This is the truth of the treasure. Knowledge, yes, but knowledge that must be protected. From now on, that is our duty. The chest pulsed again, as if agreeing with his words. The skeleton army stood firm, their eternal watch continuing, now with Milan as their new voice. The silence inside the chamber weighed heavily after the guardians had returned to their circle. The chest still glowed softly, as though it breathed with the memory of the ancients. Milan stood firm, his hand clenched into a fist as he thought about the choice he had made. He had spoken to protect, not to claim, and the guardians had obeyed him. But he could feel the unease spreading among his crew. Nero walked closer and placed a hand on his arm. You did the right thing. Taking it would have destroyed us. But Ryan stood apart, his eyes still filled with restless hunger. His voice was sharp. You threw away the greatest chance humanity has ever had. That chest could change everything. Why should we guard the legacy of a dead people when our own kind struggle to survive? The crew murmured. Some nodded at Ryan's words. They had dreamed of riches, of glory, of being remembered as the ones who brought back the treasure of an ancient race. Now, they were being told to walk away empty-handed. Milan faced them calmly, though his heart beat fast. This is not about gold or power. I saw what they left inside. It is knowledge, yes, but dangerous knowledge if used for greed. The ancients died protecting it. They chose guardians to make sure it would not fall into the wrong hands. If we take it, we will become the very threat they feared. One of the crew, a man named Torin, stepped forward. His face was hard. And who decides what is right or wrong, Captain? You. Maybe the ancients wanted their knowledge to be used, not locked away forever. You cannot expect us to walk away with nothing after all we have faced. The chamber trembled slightly, the blue light of the chest pulsing faster as though it reacted to their argument. The skeleton army shifted, their glowing eyes flickering like lanterns in a storm. Nero whispered nervously, "They can hear us. They are waiting." Milan raised his voice. "Then listen to me. If we fight among ourselves, the Guardians will strike. You saw what happened when Ryan tried to claim it. They nearly destroyed us. I carry their mark now. Only I can speak for them, and I will not betray their trust." But his words did not calm the crew. Torin's hands tightened around the hilt of his blade. "Maybe you are not fit to lead anymore. If you will not claim the treasure, then we will." Before Milan could respond, the sound of steel rang through the air. Torin and 3 others drew their weapons and stepped toward the chest. The Guardians immediately moved, raising their swords in perfect unity, their eyes blazing bright. The air grew heavy with power, a warning to all. Milan stepped forward quickly, placing himself between the rebels and the Guardians. "Stop. If you attack, they will end us all." Ryan sneered. "Then command them to stand aside. You said they obey you. Prove it. Tell them to let us take what is rightfully ours." Milan shook his head. "They obey because I chose to protect. If I command them to betray their purpose, they will destroy me first." The chamber fell silent again. The rebels stood frozen, caught between their greed and their fear. The Guardians waited, their bones still but their presence sharp as blades. Nira took a step forward, her voice steady though her hands shook. "You all saw the visions in this place. You know the truth. Those people gave everything to keep this safe. If we take it, we are no better than the enemies that destroyed them. Do you want to carry that curse back to our worlds?" Torin hesitated. His grip on his blade loosened. Some of the crew lowered their eyes, shame flickering in their faces. But Ryan's anger only grew. "You are blind," Ryan spat. "You would rather guard the bones of strangers than save your own kind. When humanity falls, remember this moment." He turned and stormed toward the shadows of the chamber. 2 of the rebels followed him, but Torin and the others stayed behind, their heads bowed. Milan let out a slow breath of relief. The Guardians lowered their weapons again, returning to their circle. The chest pulsed with calm light once more. Nero looked at Milan. "This is not over. Ryan will not give up. He will find another way." Milan nodded grimly. "I know. But as long as I live, the Guardians will not allow him to claim it. That is the vow I gave." The chamber grew quiet, but the sense of tension did not fade. Milan could feel it in his bones. The treasure was safe for now, but the greed of men was a force the ancients had not accounted for. The true trial was not the skeleton army. It was the hearts of the living. As they made their way back up the glowing stairs, Milan looked over his shoulder one last time. The skeleton guardians stood unmoving, their hollow eyes burning with eternal fire, watching, waiting, never resting. He understood them now. Their endless duty was not only to protect the treasure but also to test those who came seeking it. And now he was one of them. The crew moved through the winding tunnels in heavy silence. Their torches cast long shadows against the ancient walls, and the echo of their footsteps seemed louder than before. No one spoke of the chest, but every person carried the weight of what had happened inside the chamber. Milan walked at the front, his jaw set, his mind uneasy. He knew Ryan was not finished. A man like him did not give up so easily. His greed had already torn the crew apart, and Milan feared it would soon bring danger not just to them, but to the entire galaxy. As they reached the surface, the desert night spread wide above them. The stars shone like silver dust scattered across the dark sky. The crew breathed the cool air with relief, but Milan's eyes kept scanning the dunes. Ryan was not with them now, and that absence felt like a storm waiting to break. Nira approached Milan quietly. "Do you think he will return?" Milan's voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. "I know he will. He still believes the treasure belongs to him." The group set up a small camp outside the ruins, their fire flickering in the wind. For a while, it seemed calm, almost peaceful. But then, from the shadows of the desert, figures emerged. Ryan returned with a small band of mercenaries, their weapons gleaming in the firelight. The crew rose to their feet, hands on their blades, but Milan lifted his hand. He had expected this. Ryan stepped forward, his face hard, his eyes burning with ambition. "You should have taken it when you had the chance, Captain. Now I will. These men follow me, not you. Together, we will break the Guardians and claim what is ours." Milan stood firm. "The Guardians cannot be broken, Ryan. They are not soldiers you can fight. They are a promise made eternal. If you force this path, you will doom us all." Ryan laughed bitterly. "You speak like a servant of the dead. But I serve the living. Humanity needs this treasure, and I will not walk away empty-handed." He raised his hand, and his mercenaries charged toward the ruins. The desert floor shivered, and the air grew cold. The skeleton guardians rose from the sand itself, climbing from hidden graves, their eyes blazing with blue fire. Swords and shields glimmered under the moonlight. They stood in perfect formation, an army of death awakened once more. The mercenaries froze, fear flashing in their eyes, but Ryan shouted at them. "Fight! They are only bones." The guardians moved like a storm. Their swords struck with silent precision, and the mercenaries fell back in terror. The clash of steel rang through the night, but the skeletons never faltered. Milan stepped into the middle of the chaos, his voice cutting through the noise. "Guardians! I call you to me." The army of bones halted for a moment, their glowing eyes turning toward him. The mark on Milan's hand burned bright, and he felt their power flow into him like a river. He raised his arm and shouted, "Protect the vow. The treasure must never fall." The guardians responded, their formation tightening. Together, they pushed back the mercenaries, forcing them into retreat. But Ryan, furious and desperate, slipped past the battle and ran toward the entrance of the ruins. Milan saw him and gave chase. Nira called out, but he did not stop. He knew this was the final test. Inside the ruins, Ryan reached the glowing stairs that led down to the chest. His breath came in heavy gasps, his face wild with determination. "It will be mine," he muttered. Milan caught up to him at the base of the stairs. "Stop, Ryan. If you touch it again, they will destroy you." But Ryan only glared. "Then let them try." He rushed forward, his hands stretching toward the chest. The blue light flared violently, and the skeleton guardians appeared instantly, surrounding him with raised swords. Milan ran between them, standing in Ryan's path. "You will not pass," Milan said, his voice steady. Ryan snarled. "Then you are my enemy too." He drew his blade and lunged. The clash of steel echoed through the chamber. Ryan fought with desperate strength, but Milan's movements were calm, guided by the power of the guardians. Sparks flew as their blades met again and again. Finally, Milan struck the weapon from Ryan's hands. The rebel fell to his knees, his chest rising and falling with rage. "You are a fool, Milan. All this power, wasted. You will regret this." Milan looked down at him with sorrow. "The true waste is your greed. You could have stood with us. Instead, you chose to fight against everything." The guardians moved closer, their blades glowing. Ryan's eyes widened with fear. He tried to scramble back, but there was nowhere to go. The chest pulsed one final time, and the Guardian's light surrounded him. In an instant, Ryan was gone, erased like dust in the wind. The chamber fell silent once more. The Guardians returned to their eternal circle, their swords lowering in unison. The chest glowed gently, calm and undisturbed. Milan stood there, breathing heavily. He had not wanted this ending for Ryan, but it had been inevitable. The ancients had set their test long ago, and those who failed were claimed by it. Nira entered quietly, her face pale but her eyes strong. "It is over." Milan nodded. "Yes. The treasure is safe. And now, so is humanity. But we must guard the story. Others will come, and they must be warned." Together, they left the chamber. As Milan climbed the stairs, he looked back one last time. The skeleton guardians stood eternal, their eyes glowing in the dark, their vow unbroken. He understood now. The chest was not just a treasure. It was a mirror, showing the truth of every soul that reached for it. And for as long as the guardians stood, the test would never end. Milan stepped into the desert night, the stars burning bright above. His duty was clear. The ancients had chosen him, and he would not fail.